I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 16 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration, Health and Safety. The Board of Internal Economy requires that committee adheres to the following health protocols, which are in effect until June 23, 2022. All individuals wishing to enter the Parliament present must be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. All those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask, except for members who are at their place during proceedings. Please contact the clerk of the committee for further information on preventive measures for health and safety. As the chair, I will enforce these measures, and I thank you for your cooperation. Hybrid meeting information. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. I would like to outline few rules to follow for everyone. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen, you may choose to hear floor audio or in English or French. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be muted. The committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list for all members to assist in managing our time and to avoid having to cut anyone off. I will hold up the cards when there is 1 minute, 30 seconds, and a red card to show that your time is up. I would ask you to please keep an eye out for these cards. So, Ms. Lalonde, you were raising your hand.
Oui, merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez, j'aimerais bring my motion forward, if that's okay, and I can read it pour le comité. Que le comité invite les représentants d'IRCC à comparaître pour 2 heures en public sur l'étude des résultats différentiels en matière d'immigration et que tout engagement
Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to repeat my motion that the committee invite representatives from IRCC to appear for 2 hours in public on the study regarding differential outcomes in immigration, and that any committee resulting from this meeting be made public ahead of the examination of the preliminary report of this committee.
Madam Chair, I ask that this motion be taken into consideration as quickly as possible due to the time sensitivity. And certainly I hope that member will support, because that way it would give instruction if it's the will of the committee, and the clerk can process with the ask to have the officials at our next meeting. Merci.
Mr. Janice?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not opposed in principle, but I do think we want to ensure that the committee is able to continue with its regularly scheduled activities as well. So I'd just like to propose an amendment, and that is to add at the end of the motion during the Easter recess. So that the meeting would take place during the Easter recess, so we don't lose time on the important work we're doing. And then I would also like to propose that we add the minister and ahead of officials. The minister, of course, doesn't have to come, but to give the minister an opportunity to appear with his officials is, I think, appropriate. The minister is ultimately accountable for the decisions of the department, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't give him the opportunity. So those are my proposed amendments, and if we can accept those, we can proceed.
Thank you. We now have an amendment. So Ms. Lalonde has moved her motion. The 48 hours notice was given. Mr. Janice has moved an amendment. So we have an amendment on the floor. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, I guess, speaking to the amendment, I don't oppose to the idea of having a special CIMM committee meeting during the Easter break in order to facilitate this request. However, it's not like me to say that we shouldn't request the minister to come back. However, I think the minister did come to this committee meeting already. And I think for the purpose of this motion, we really want to drill down to get officials to answer questions and to provide undertakings to committee members so that we can complete our report. And so I would suggest that we park the request for the minister to come forward and to have the officials to come forward, because we really want to get down to getting those documentations and asking for, I think, sometimes technical questions to be answered by the officials so that we can get on with it.
To clarify, we go into the further debate on this amendment. As said by the clerk, Mr. Janice is moving 2 amendments. So you will have to move 1 amendment. The first one is yours, is that it is during the Easter break, and then the second one is that we invite the minister for that. So you will have to move your first amendment, deal with it, and then come back to the second amendment. Mr. Janice.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just on that, in the interest of working in the spirit of collaboration, I'll leave behind the component on the minister, since given Ms. Kwan's comments, and just move the Easter break, the Easter recess amendment, and hopefully that will pass, and that will allow us to pass the motion quickly and move forward.
Mr. Janice, Mr. Janice has moved an amendment that the meeting on the motion proposed by Ms. Lalonde be held during the Easter break. Are all the members okay with it?
Not to? Madame la Présidente,
Madame Lalonde, I would ask to speak.
I have a speaking list, so we will go by the speaking list. So we have Ms. Lalonde, Mr. Brunel Desep, and then Mr. Al-Khouri.
I'll allow my fellow colleagues to speak.
No, we will have to go off to Mr. Brunel Desep and then him. Okay. Mr. Brunel Desep.
To hold this session during the Easter break, I don't know if you know. I have a lot of activities in my writing, and I know that my schedule, and I look at I really do have a heavy schedule. I want to take advantage of all the time I have in my writing, unless I have a specific date when this meeting will be held. But just leaving it at during the Easter break, that's too open. And people are waiting for me in my writing to meet with them, or at least give me a date. But for the time being, just saying during the Easter recess, that doesn't suit me.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Khouri. And then Mr. Dhaliwal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to welcome all the witnesses here. Madame Lalonde presented a motion. Mr. Ganis asked for an amendment. I think we should go back to Ms. Lalonde's motion, and then we can deal with Mr. Janis's amendment.
Mr. Al-Khouri, just to clarify that, when an amendment is moved, we have to deal with the amendment first, and then we can go back to that motion. So procedurally, we have to deal with the amendment. Mr. Dhaliwal, and then Mr. Ali, and then Mr. Janis.
Thank
Mr.
you, Madam
Dhaliwal.
Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would support the idea of Mr. Brunel Desep, because if I look at that particular week, my constituents are celebrating Easter, Ramadan, and then also Khalsa Day, Baisakhi. So there are so many events going on in my constituency, as well as so my constituency week. I want to spend most of my time with all the communities that are celebrating these religious holdings. And so I would support Mr. Brunel Desep basically not to have a meeting in that particular week.
Mr. Dhaliwal, Mr. Ali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo Mr. Dhaliwal and Mr. Desep, and I just wanted to put my case to my fellow committee colleagues. I have 3 kids, 13 years, 12 years, and 9.5. they are looking forward for these 2 weeks, and also my constituents. So if we are going to have, like we have Ramadan, we have Vaisakhi, we have other events, Easter. So I would appeal to all of you, so please, not to push us into those Easter 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So respectfully, I mean, the context of this is we have members of the government putting forward a motion. I mean, really, I thought at a point when there's already, there's already. I don't know what I can say given that. Well, I mean, it's a matter of public record on the notice that there was consideration of a draft report that happened at the last meeting. So people already know that there's been consideration of a draft report already on this, and so we're having a proposition for another witness. And I want to accommodate that if that's the desire of members. But my point is just that. Since the government brought forward this proposal for additional witnesses, let's not slow down the work of the committee that needs to happen. We have limited time slots during sitting weeks. So I'm trying to accommodate what government members want by saying let's set aside 2 hours in a 2-week period. And Madam Chair, I don't know if I can sub-amend my own amendment. I think maybe I can. I think I would just like to add during the Eastern recess, add following consultations with members about their availability.
So, Mr. Jennings, you cannot make an amendment to your amendment. Okay,
maybe somebody else will want to propose the idea, but I think if we just clarify in the motion following consultations with members about their availability, that will assist us in getting this done.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Just to clarify for all the members that when a person who has moved the amendment cannot make changes to that. So, Mr. Brunel Desep and then Ms. Kwan.
I understand what Garnet is saying, and I'm prepared to say, well, if at that point, what we could do is add a session when the House is sitting during a parliamentary week. I think there's consensus about that. The members, well, we won't be losing any time in committee, and everybody will be happy to have their time during the constituency week. What do you think of that? Can I? Madam Chair, could I perhaps suggest a sub-amendment to Garnet's amendment, saying that the additional meeting will take place during the parliamentary when the Parliament is sitting?
Yeah.
Now we have a sub-amendment. Mr. Brunel Desap is moving that to change Easter during the Easter week to sitting weeks. So that's what he has proposed. So we have that sub-amendment on the floor now. Ms. Kwan and then Mr. Jennings. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll just be very quick. I'll support the sub-amendment. I think the idea here is just to try and get an extra sitting period to accommodate this. Whether it happens in the break week or during a regular week, I'm fine with that. And I fully understand that people have lots of things that they've already planned. It may be difficult to make adjustments. So in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, I will support Mr. Bruno Desep's recommendation.
Okay, I think maybe sometimes it's just more efficient rather than sub-amending everything to make sure the chair understands what the general direction of the committee is and go from there, right? So because I mean we could specify it in the language of the motion, but I think I'm getting the sense that there's hopefully a consensus around saying we should not do this meeting during a regular CIMM committee slot. It should happen during a sitting week, but in an additional time slot so that we're not detracting from the times that have already been set aside for the committee to do its work. If there's a consensus around that, then we can, I think, just agree by unanimous consent to pull the amendments and adopt the motion. Is there agreement to direct the chair accordingly? Yes.
Is there a unanimous consent on Mr. Jenner's suggestion that the meeting on the proposed motion by Ms. Lalonde be held in the sitting weeks, but not during the regular CIMM hours? We will have to, if that's the will of the committee, then I will have to work with the clerk to see what time slot would be available based on the services. So is that the will of, do I have the unanimous consent on that? Okay, so everyone seems to be in agreement. So, we dispose of the sub-amendment and the amendment. Now we have the motion on the floor, which has been moved by Ms. Lalonde. So, seeing no further debate, do I have the unanimous consent on that motion?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so the motion is adopted. Okay, Mr. Jennis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since we're doing motions, I'd like to move the one that I have on notice as well, with respect to disclosure of information on the differential outcome study. I too think this is very important for getting technical information that we require. We heard from a number of witnesses concerns about transparency, about their ability to have access to information. So I think this committee should be accessing some of that information to strengthen our work, but also to make that information available to witnesses that said they need that information and don't have access to it. So this is the motion that I'm proposing, and please bear with me. It's somewhat lengthy, but members have notice of it. That pursuant to Standing Order 108-1A and in relation to the committee's study of differential outcomes in Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada decisions, that the Department of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship provide the committee with A, any and all data and documents in its possession that show acceptance and rejection rates for visa applications broken down by I, processing office, II, application category, III, category of or country of origin of applicant, IV, race, and V, religion. B, a list of which visa offices currently use advanced analytics to triage applications.
The interpreter doesn't have the motion.
Mr. Jennis, can we give that to the interpreters?
Yes, sending it now. I've emailed it to the interpreters. They should
Je pense qu'une personne donnait
Mail to the interpreters, so they should have it.
OK. Je vais commencer avec
please.
B, Monsieur Bernadette. Avec B.
Mr. Jennis, you can
OK.
continue. All conversations should be directed through the chair.
OK. B, a list of which visa offices currently use advanced analytics to triage applications and which applications they are used for. C, a list of how many advanced analytics triage models there are and which visa offices use which model. D, any quality assurance reports for each advanced analytics model that is being used by a visa office. E, the current instructions to decision makers regarding the implementation of the advanced analytics pilot model for any processing centers that use advanced analytics. F, any training manuals or reviews regarding Watchtower and a list of all priority flags that have been used in Chinook. G, Chinook Plus and GCMS Chinook user manuals. H,
I'm sorry. Maybe there's a problem with the channel. I have an interpretation problem, so I just want to resolve that so that I can do the work properly. So B, we can go with B.
Okay, I'll return to B. Okay. B, a list of which visa offices currently use advanced analytics to triage applications and which applications they are used for. C, a list of how many different advanced analytics triage models there are and which visa offices use which model. D, any quality assurance reports for each advanced analytics model that is being used by a visa office. E, the current instructions to decision makers regarding the implementation of the advanced analytics pilot model for any processing centers that use advanced analytics. F, any training manuals or reviews regarding Watchtower and a list of all priority flags that have been used in Chinook. G, Chinook Plus and GCMS Chinook user manuals. H, all training manuals and documents prepared and used in training IRCC staff on the use of Chinook. I, all contracts IRCC holds with Deloitte & Touche LLP, Accenture Inc., and McKinsey regarding artificial intelligence, digital platform modernization, Chinook, and the Digital Services Response Project. J, privacy analysis conducted with respect to Chinook. K, contracts between IRCC and Apply Board and between IRCC and Apply Proof since 2015. L, project launch terms of reference and roadmap documents for the Service Transformation Strategy and Roadmap, the IM/IT Strategy and Roadmap Project, TDS, Innovation Strategy. M, IRCC Policy Playbook on Automated Support for Decision Making, all editions. N, any additional programming information and instructions used for advanced analytic systems. O, the raw and complete systems that IRCC employees provide to Polera Strategic Insights for the Anti-Racism Study. P, the current and historic processing times for each visa office and category from 2015 until now. Q, the course content and materials used for any anti-racism training or information sessions conducted for IRCC employees. And R, all materials produced for the IRCC Digital Transformation Interdepartmental Advisory Committee, DMA level. And that the said materials be delivered to the committee within 40 days, along with any proposed redactions. Versions of the documents with the proposed redactions shall be published on the committee's website within 10 days of receipt. The committee shall issue a press release highlighting the publication of these documents, and unredacted documents shall be distributed to committee members within the same time frame. The documents in redacted and unredacted forms shall be shared with the parliamentary law clerk, who will then be invited to meet with the committee in camera to advise on the appropriateness of the proposed redactions, and the committee may then make determinations as to whether to publish all, some, or none of the redacted documents. Madam Chair, I want to emphasize that the list of things I'm asking for is not my own list. I reached out to the witnesses who had come to us and raised concerns about transparency issues, and I simply encouraged them to tell me what information they would need in order to be able to do their work in a more transparent way. So, I mean, members may have concerns with one or two of the letter items, and certainly we can amend the motion. But we had many witnesses tell us there were concerns about transparency and access to information, and so I asked them what information do they need. And they provided me with a list, and I'm now coming back to the committee to say, let's use our powers as a committee to do something concrete, which is address the transparency challenges, gather this information, give the government the opportunity, unfettered opportunity to redact where they think appropriate, publish the unredacted documents, and then be able to review the redacted documents ourselves to assess the appropriateness of those redactions. So I think that's a reasonable procedure, and I think it's us trying to respond to a very real issue raised by witnesses. So I hope this motion will have the support of colleagues. Thank you.
Mr. Janice, seeing no further hand raised for the debate, we can go into the vote. So, Mr. Clerk, if you can take the vote. Ms. Kwan?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just want to make a quick comment before we go to a vote. We just passed a motion just now from Mr. Lon, which will bring officials to this committee meeting, to which we can request undertakings, which could include the documents that Mr. Janice has requested. So in many ways, it's a duplication of a request, I would think. And so from that perspective, I would like to just proceed with having officials here and then having us make the request to the officials, and hopefully we'll get the documentations that we require before we proceed with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, respectfully, I know in the past, Ms. Kwan's been a great champion of transparency around these issues, and I hope we'll see that continue. And look, this motion is very different from asking officials to appear. Officials coming, asking questions, answering our questions, or not, maybe at least responding to our questions, is very different from requesting primary source documents and making those primary source documents public. Now, I suppose that I could move this motion again after the officials are here, but the officials are not going to come with all these documents in hand. And if we want the officials to come with all these documents in hand, let's make it explicit in this motion. Although this motion gives them much more time to do so. So again, I think in the interest of transparency, let's recognize that requests for documents are very different from hearing verbal responses from officials. So that's really all I have to say. We can proceed to a vote, and the stakeholders will be able to see, of course, who's standing with them in their desire for transparency on this. Thank you.
Desap and then Ms. Kwan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's difficult not to give reason to Mr. Genes's arguments. That we would never get this type of information from the officials who are going to appear. It seems to me that's quite obvious. And since the very start of those two studies that we've done, since the very start of our work, we've been talking about this lack of transparency. This motion is about getting important information, and I don't see how we can vote against getting more information for the committee work. This is a bonus for us. As members of this committee, this will help us to do our work better, and I don't see how we could vote against a motion that requests documents that help us do our work with respect to processing of refugee claims. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Kwan, and then Mr. Reddycop. Ms. Kwan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say very clearly, the motion that we just passed is not just for officials to come before the committee. There's a component within that motion which says clearly that they would have to provide undertakings on the public record to which the committee members request. Some of the documentations that Mr. Janis has requested in his motion will be some of the documentations that I would be interested in receiving. I have every intention to actually make those requests of the officials and for them to provide it to us on the public record for the purpose of transparency. So I reject the notion that somehow if I don't support Mr. Janis's motion that I'm against transparency. Nothing could be further from the truth, and that we will have an opportunity to undertake this work. If, in fact, through that process, after the officials come forward with the request of the documentations that we are requesting to be received on the public record before we write our report is deficient, there's always an opportunity to follow up with respect to that. So I think from this perspective, I like to actually give the officials a chance, to give the department a chance to do its work, and that's for that reason I think that we can park this motion. In fact, that's what I would suggest. In fact, I would move a motion to to adjourn debate on Mr. Janis's motion.
Ms. Kwan has moved a motion to adjourn the debate, so it's non-debatable, so we will have to vote on that. So, Mr. Clerk, if you can take the vote on Ms. Kwan's motion to adjourn the debate.
The question is on the motion to adjourn the debate of Mr. Genuis' motion. Mr. Ali?
Yes.
Mr. Dhaliwal?
Yes.
Mr. El Khoury?
Pour.
Ms. Kayabaga? Yes. Madame Lalonde? Oui. Mr. Benzin?
Vote no.
Mr. Genuis?
No.
Mr. Hallan?
No.
Mr. Redekop?
Against.
Mr. Brunel Duceppe? Ms. Kwan?
4.
2. Okay. Yeas 7, nays 4.
Okay, so the motion passes. The debate is adjourned, and now we go into the vote for the motion.
No, the debate on the motion is adjourned, so now there's nothing on the floor, and
So no more debate on that motion. The debate is adjourned. We will now proceed to our today's meeting for the witnesses. Today's meeting is on differential outcomes in immigration, refugees, and citizenship Canada decisions. So we have two panels based on the time available. We will have the first panel for 45 minutes and then the second panel for 45 minutes. Because of budget, the services are not available to us. So the first panel, I will take this moment on behalf of all the members to welcome our witnesses for the first panel. We are joined by Mario Bellissimo, Certified Specialist in Citizenship and Immigration Law and Refugee Protection, representing Bellissimo Law Group Professional Corporation. We are also joined by Jerick Mendoza, Immigration Consultant, representing J. Mendoza and Associates, Canada Immigration Consulting Group. And the third witness for the first panel is Vishal Ghai, representing Voices for Families. I would welcome the witnesses. Each witness will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will go into our round of questioning. So if we can start with Mr. Bellissimo. Mr. Bellissimo, you will have 5 minutes, and you can please begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of Parliament, and fellow panelists. Thank you for the invitation to appear. The study of differential outcomes in IRCC decisions is definitely complex and an expansive topic, and I'm happy to take questions on that generally. But for purposes of my remarks, in my opening remarks, I'm going to focus on advanced analytics as part of AI, artificial intelligence solutions. My professional career has been dedicated to the practice of study of immigration, citizenship, and refugee law, immigration law for brevity. For the past near 25 years, I've accompanied applicants in the journey from application stage to the Supreme Court of Canada and back, working to advocate for the preservation of foundational legal rights like equality, fairness, and individualization in immigration law and policy. AI engages all of these issues. In fact, for some like me grappling with the enormity of the implications surrounding the expanded use of AI solutions, one can find themselves equally in awe and in dread. Simply put, the awe part is the exciting and transformative possibilities. Expedited processing, minimizing officer error bias, enhanced user access, and better information gathering, amongst other potential gains. However, part of the dread arises from concerns AI will only perpetuate existing racial, socioeconomic, and political divides and discrimination that are so entrenched in our society. AI, as we all know, is already being used to triage applications, but the potential is so much more, and the plans are far greater than triaging. The hope is that if AI is applied properly, we can avoid the missteps we've seen and witnessed domestically and internationally, where AI has reproduced bias. And like in the Supreme Court of Canada case in Ewart, or internationally, the risk classification assessment tool used for detention in the United States, or the border control lie detector used by the European Union at borders, or even the New Zealand technology to identify potential overstayers. These are just a small number of examples of AI use gone wrong. At its core, until we are all required by law to be on a relatable informational plane, applicants, the public, and many stakeholders remain at a disadvantage in understanding how parts of their lives may be reordered by AI. I remain optimistic that improvement is possible, and recommendations this committee has already heard with respect to an ombudsperson, enhanced IRC training as set out in the Polaire report are potential important steps. But even more will be required in the presence of disruptive technology to avoid potential discriminatory consequences. As set out in the 10 recommendations in our brief, efforts to transform immigration delivery must include legislative measures be put in place for transparent, explainable, and equitable AI governance, recognizing the technology is not neutral and that historical data, values, and norms propel AI. Training AI programmers, analysts, and thought leaders, as one example, must not only be reflective and responsive to vulnerable persons and groups, but must be required by law to ensure diversity and inclusion balances are maintained for those that train and drive the technology. an algorithm charter like in New Zealand, external audits with enforcement powers, and mandatory external consultations are steps that have been recognized internationally as effective and essential for proper AI governance. We cannot only look at where the use and the technology is today. Thus, the need to work with and leverage all stakeholders are acute, given the rapidly evolving challenges ahead. IRCC is staffed by many hardworking, well-intentional individuals that want to make a positive change. Our council, academic, and AI community in Canada are also well-positioned to make a meaningful contribution to IRC's use of AI. If we put in the collective work now, pressing for a strong and modern legislative framework predicated on collaboration, oversight, transparency, and responsible implementation, we have the potential to be a world leader. There is much work to do. But this is the time to reimagine, revolutionize, and reorder our Canadian immigration decision-making built on a strong legal and technological foundation grounded in legislation, a foundation undisturbed no matter the international and technological pressure that may be on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Mr. Mendoza. Mr. Mendoza, the immigration consultant. Mr. Mendoza, you will have 5 minutes for your opening. Can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the members of the committee for giving me the opportunity to provide inputs on today's meeting. My name is Jeric Mendoza of J. Mendoza and Associates based here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. The recent Polar report on the systemic racism within the IRCC is a sad reminder that racism has not left the Canadian immigration system. More troubling is the fact that it's happening behind the scenes. Today, I would like to expose more discriminatory policies or issues which to me is hidden to us in plain sight. The first issue that I would like to raise is the Canadian education equivalency requirement in most immigration applications. What can be more racist than to require an assessment to see if the education of a foreign national obtained overseas is equivalent to Canadian education? How do we define Canadian education? Is there a special sauce that we need to find? Why is it that in most cases, a 2-year post-secondary diploma in the Philippines, for example, is just reduced to secondary education? Does it mean that if one takes, say, a 2-year automotive course in the Philippines, that you already forget what you learned? Even among schools in Canada, there are various factors in play that make it difficult to say one's bachelor's degree is the same or different from the other. So if we cannot reliably measure, then why require this assessment? More so, why measure it in the first place? What issue backed by data are we trying to address? It is therefore my recommendation to eliminate education equivalency assessment requirements in all immigration programs in both provincial and federal levels because it's a racist policy. The second issue that I would like to raise is the biased language skill requirements on different immigration programs. I fully understand the need that one should be able to communicate effectively to become successful anywhere you are in the world. However, requiring a language exam in English or French is obviously discriminatory to non-native English or French speakers like myself. So how do we reconcile this? Here are my recommendations. First, eliminate the graduated point system where a native English or French speaker can possibly score higher points because of their language ability despite a non-native English or French speaker having more skills or work experience. For example, right now, if one applies under the Federal Skilled Worker Program, one can obtain a maximum point of 28 in language skill compared to just 15 maximum points for work experience. So where has the experience is the best teacher gone? Should it now be language is the best teacher? Is a cook with a CLB level of 8 a better cook than a cook with a CLB level of 4? Do we ask Canadian citizens or permanent residents their IELTS or CELPIP exam when hiring a mechanic or a welder? If not, then it's racism. As a compromise, I suggest using instead a pass-fail system against a minimum language level where anything lower makes it difficult for them to survive in Canada. I believe it's at the very least a CLB3 or at most CLB4. Next, allow employers to certify language skills as a substitute to a formal language exam if they're providing a job offer. More so, let employers or professional regulatory bodies require a higher language level as they deem fit for their occupation, not immigration. Finally, remove the expiry of language exams. Right now, language exams have a 2-year expiry. If I can speak effectively English or French today, does it mean I lose this ability 2 years or more from now? The third and final issue that I would like to raise brings me back to the Polara report issue. As evidenced by the Polara report issue, racism in Canadian immigration happens behind the scenes. In this regard, I suggest the following. First, require supervisor concurrence for all case refusals. By doing so, racist, biased, or incompetent case officer has a solid reminder that his or her decision will go through further scrutiny and hopefully deter him or her to decide with bias. Next, provide applicants or their representative immediate access to case notes. Who can be a better guardian against racism than the applicants themselves? By providing applicants or their representatives immediate access to the case notes, they may possibly identify issues early on, including racism, while their case are in process, not after a decision is made. And finally, set up a complaint or a grievance system where applicants or IRCC workers can raise issues of racism, general bias, or incompetence of immigration personnel. More so, provide a way where case officers can be held accountable on the wrong decisions they make on applications. Thank you.
We will now proceed to Mr. Guy. Mr. Guy, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and honorable committee members for affording us the time to speak. I represent a self-advocacy group with an outreach of over 6,000 victims of IRCC's racist system. I use the word racist indeed, especially for families that have been separated forcefully by the Minister of Immigration and IRCC. This system is inequitable, archaic, and systematically biased. We submitted our recommendations in a petition that was signed with over 5,600 people, including their comments. As a group, we have been pushing for immediate family reunification, which the Minister of Immigration has proven time and time again that if there is a will, there is a way. Just like the MI or the ministerial instruction that is allowing Ukrainians into Canada within 15 days, sidelining other refugees, waiving all fees just because of the white privilege. And they are Afghans, Hong Kongers, victims of the Lebanon bomb blast that were not afforded the same by the Minister of Immigration. So we basically deal with the spouses from the Outland application stream. Today, I would like to actually highlight that this systemic racism and racism exists almost at the bottom rank of this system, of the process. Through a lot of crowdsourcing, we have now actually identified in the process of Outland application that ageism, meaning if you have an age difference, you're discriminated against. Previous marital status, if you're a divorcee, automatically flagged by the AI. Social, educational, economic status differences flagged by the AI. Cultural and religious difference also flagged by the AI. Now, what is AI? AI is a program. And the program is as good as the person that codes it. So if the person coding it is racist or unconsciously is following data over 6 years, is going to bring that racism forward all the way to the bottom rank, unfortunately. And today we are glad that finally victims of the spousal outland application are able to represent themselves today. I bring forward a message from one of the youngest advocates, Tito, 10 years old, with autism, who separated from his dad, Carlos, for over 4 years. They were afforded an interview via writ of mandamus over service standards. However, there are no panel physicians for them to be able to do their re-medicals. So, yet again, they are stuck. And in his own words, he says, can you please tell the committee and the Minister of Immigration that families are made of love, not black, white, brown, he or she. That is a 10-year-old saying this. Sorry. And that he would like one day for his dad to take him to school so people can believe that he does indeed have a father. I will gladly take questions, and I will give you real-life examples of the racist hurdles that outland applications face, with proof in black and white, where locally engaged staff have actually put it in writing in GSM notes that we can provide you. This is the bottom rank of the racist organization. Racism is embedded deeply in the immigration system, from the top to the bottom. And it is about time we address how we're going to solve these issues. And unfortunately, the sole discretion and the use of cultural norms given to locally engaged staff is actually one of the major barriers for spouses of Canadians trying to get to Canada.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Guy. Your time is up. You will get an opportunity when we go into our round of questioning. With this, we will start our first round of question, and we will begin with Mr. Reddycop. Mr. Reddycop, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today, and I apologize that we got started late, but we'll make the best of the time that we have. And in that light, Mr. Guy, I just want to make a note to you. You mentioned about examples that you have, and you may get some questions on that, but I would just encourage you to please write some of those down and submit them to the committee in written form, because that would be very, very helpful for us to look at later, and we may not have enough time to talk about them, so I would just suggest that for you. To Mr. Mendoza, thank you for being here today. Your third point that you mentioned on racism, your suggestions there about having supervisor concurrence, providing case notes, and some sort of a grievance system. And I guess my question to you is, those recommendations obviously came out of some experiences that you've had and some cases that you've had. Could you give us some examples of what those cases might be, just to give us some context on that?
Okay, so thank you, Your Honor, for your questions. So basically, with regards with, well, our situation as immigration consultants and applicants is when we submit applications, we're basically talking to a wall. We submit an application, we do it online, but we don't have a way to even speak to the other person on the other side. So if we get a decision, if we get anything from any application, it would just be probably a notice of a medical or some issues about one not believing, let's say, for example, a couple is not truly a common law couple. So for one is, well, my situation is I don't receive too many refusals because, but the problem is once we get those refusals, it ends. Like it's basically talking to a wall. You don't have anybody to call to explain the said decision. So I think that's basically my point on asking for immediate access to access notes, because there's a solution right now. It's basically asking through the ATIP system or the access to information and privacy system, which would require a different process for us to even just generate or get whatever case notes the officers have into look into those process. So basically those the issues that I raise here are basically brought about by the situation that applicants and even immigration consultants ourselves are basically talking to a wall.
Okay, thank you.
So right now,
Thank you. So I noticed that on your website you talk about caregiver class as one of the categories that you work with. And according to the department's own figures, it takes sometimes up to two years on average to fill a caregiver class, while some other jobs that are traditionally geared towards Caucasians or others get filled a little bit faster. And I asked the Associate Deputy Minister of Immigration why these numbers are different, and she didn't have an answer for me. And just wondering, in your experience, have you seen a difference, lengthy times in caregiver applications, and what are some examples, or do you have any examples of that?
Well, basically, thank you, Your Honor. So basically, the first application we did under the new caregiver program, we submitted December 2019. We only had an approval of a work permit this January 2022. So that's almost more than, 2 years of processing. I have another client. We submitted an application before that. We submitted an application as well with a work permit. So basically, she's considered unemployed status. So she's working on her work permit is already expired, but basically she's working on an employed status because we submitted the application before expiry. But up to now, more than 2 years, we haven't received any decision yet on the work permit. So we have a client here, like she might not have access to healthcare. She might not have access to other government services because she has an expired work permit. So basically, that's the kind of situations that we had. I never seen yet, since the new caregiver program was launched, a quick processing time. Right now, after 2 years, I only had one result. The rest, we're still waiting.
I want to switch gears a bit to talk about human trafficking. We've had several issues that have brought this up, and the issue of mail order brides. And we had Arlene Ruiz from Saskatoon herself actually was here last meeting, and she spoke about this with my colleague. And I had a case in my constituency where a Filipino woman was dumped by her husband basically because she had terminal breast cancer, and then she was deported. I've asked the IRCC officials why our human trafficking laws are not being exercised properly, and didn't really get an answer to that. So I wonder if you have thoughts on, have you ever seen anything like that? Have you seen if there are safeguards in place to protect vulnerable women from Immigration Canada and CBSA?
With regards with human trafficking, I think there has been some progress in terms of there are programs for those that have vulnerable spouse here in Canada to be able to get out of the system and apply for something else. Basically, I'm just not really. I don't have a personal experience in terms of couples having human trafficking issue. I have more personal experience in terms of applications being delayed indefinitely because they just don't believe that the couple is a couple without further explaining the situation. So I had this case where I had a couple. We received a note that the officer didn't.
Sorry for interrupting. The time is up for Mr. Reddycop. We will now proceed to our next member, Ms. Kayabaga. Ms. Kayabaga, you will have 6 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also like to start my questions by thanking our witnesses for taking the time to be here and share their experiences, and some of them their personal experiences. And I share my heartfelt feelings with you. I do want to ask a question to Mr. Balsamo, who talked about the AI and regulating and legislating AI. I'm curious to know who, Mr. Balsamo, do you think should be, where should we legislate AI? Would it be through the companies that are offering the service, or would it be through the companies that are using it to collect this data?
So thank you for the question. It would really be two-part. I think Canada generally needs AI legislation, and then we need legislation specific to immigration. The Economic Action Plan that was passed in 2015, it was 7 years ago, and it's on that very broad legislation with very little detail in which all of this AI is being actioned. But there was not even a debate at the time on it because although it was emerging, there were no comments. So when we speak about the companies and who's driving the technology, what's important to understand is any third-party use of technology like AI. So IRCC, to their credit, are developing AI in-house, but other places like the Canada Border Services Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada, they are outsourcing a third party. So it's very easy at that point to begin to lose traction, who has the business assets, who has the proprietary control. So general legislation, and we can look at countries that are further ahead of us as New Zealand, England, Australia, and the measures they've put in place. So I think in terms of legislation, we need to start right away with an algorithmic charter, which sets out what type of algorithms. I noticed during the debate, there was a lot of discussion today about models, but really where the meat of everything is in the algorithms, and in Immigration Canada's case, the undisclosed officer rules. Those rules are not even disclosed to the officers that are deciding the applications. That's the basis of what you're triaging. So we have a lot of work to do to kind of get up to the ethical standards we've seen and the recommended governance standards we've seen throughout the world.
Thank you. I want to go back to the algorithm part, so which kind of connects back to the person who's giving the service out. I think that, with IRCC, the AI collects information that is then presented to an agent who then goes through the application. I think it's important to note that. But I think in terms of the discriminations that we know show up in AI, it's behind the algorithm. So maybe are you saying that then we should look into who is regulating, who's collecting the algorithm and who's putting the algorithm, who's behind it basically, which goes back to the companies that are offering the services versus the companies that are using the service.
Right. I mean, IRCC is being trained by data scientists within IRCC. What's happening here is that we need algorithm impact assessments. IRCC has begun to do that with a few of the categories, but it can't be opaque. It has to be relatable. It has to be in plain language. I noticed one of the recommendations was for an expert panel, and that's helpful. But ultimately, unless we can understand, and I mean we laypersons can understand what is going into those rules. I'll give you an example on a study permit. Are individuals that are over the age of 30 triaged in a different category because there's a deemed assumption that someone over 30 is really not pursuing education at this stage of their lives. Mr. Guy provided some examples of other ways that things can get triaged. This has to be in plain sight. We have to go behind the curtain. There's no need to have the transparency, the lack of transparency.
Thank you so much. I want to get back to the Polaris report before my time expires. We did talk about, the report, and everybody knows what's in the report. I'm not going to get into that. I wonder, perhaps for Mr. Mendoza, what do you think about a system where IRCC continues to have regular reports such as the Polaris report to make sure that if there are changes that are being made in IRCC, we can be able to track them? And I don't know, someone mentioned about the ombudsman's person as well, and I wonder what other roles would you want to see the ombudsman take in IRCC?
So basically, what I'm looking in terms of the ombudsman is that there's an exchange of grievances, right? Like, for example, if I'm facing an incompetent case officer, I should be able to have a way to complain, to get this message across. Having just a report is really a passive way of doing this. It's not proactive. Like it would probably happen once a year, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of cases that may be facing racism or incompetent case officers refusing applications left and right. So the ombudsman system would make sure that, well, basically it's a system that would deter officers to
Thank you so much. In my last 30 seconds, my last question, 15 seconds. Quickly, I want to understand where Mr. Guy got the flags that he mentioned that are through AI. Could you mention where you might have collected that information from? Was it shared from IRCC, or did someone share that information to you, Mr. Guy?
Sorry for interrupting. Your time is up. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desaep. Mr. Brunel Desaep, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to thank the witnesses who are here with us today. They will improve our report thanks to your expertise. Mr. Guy, you were quite upset during your testimony. This moved me. You talked about some definite cases of racism. You talked about unconscious bias. To me, there's a difference between racism and unconscious bias. A witness who appeared before a committee said you have to call a spade, even if it's uncomfortable to do so. In your opinion, are we talking about unconscious bias or bias at IRCC? Mr. Guy.
Sorry, I didn't get that in English.
Okay. So I'll begin again. There was no interpretation. Could we resolve that problem, please? Maybe he hasn't pressed the right button. But perhaps the witness didn't know what to do.
If I can ask Mr. Guy, you have to select the language at the bottom of your screen. You might be on the floor audio. You should please select English.
So it is on English.
Okay. We will start the clock again. So, Mr. Brunel Desaep, you can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do you hear me? Do you hear me? Do you hear the interpretation? Yes. Good. That's Canadian bilingualism. So, as Mr. Guy said, you were upset during your testimony. At least I was moved by what you said. You talked about cases of flagrant racism. IRC talks about unconscious bias, but there's a difference between that and racism. A witness told us during a committee meeting that we have to call a spade, and that there is, in fact, racism, even if it makes people uncomfortable to hear that. We have to be able to name a problem if we want to resolve it. So do you make a distinction between unconscious bias and racism? Or do you disagree with the IRC on this point?
I strongly disagree because it is at the bottom rank of the order. Personally, I have been separated 5 years from my family, and the flag was because I was divorced. I got an interview 1 month ago, and the interview was for 10 minutes in person. We were not even afforded a virtual interview. So I absolutely disagree that it is unconscious. It is definitely conscious.
I wanted to hear what you had to say on that, Mr. Guy. Mr. Bellissimo, the Liberals in the last round talked about an ombudsman position, and I think the idea is starting to make its way forward. And I wanted to hear your opinion on that. A lot of people have said, study after study, meeting after meeting, that an immigration ombudsman would help us to resolve some of these problems. I'd like to hear what you have to say about the possibility of creating an ombudsman office with respect to immigration.
Thank you for the question. I have a two-part answer to that. First, the nature of the ombudsperson that we're creating in terms of resourcing, enforcement powers, will they actually have the ability to move the needle, or will it potentially become another organization that has hundreds of thousands of complaints and it also becomes backlog? So I think how you position it will turn on its effectiveness. The second part of my answer is this. I think we have an opportunity, as I said in my opening remarks, to reimagine and reorder the way we deal with immigration in Canada. And what I mean by that is we can always deal with the problems or the symptoms that flow, but really we need to get to the underlying condition and begin from the other way. So instead of always having more remedial mechanisms, the idea would be to leverage the technology in an effective way. Look at, for example, Australia had an immigration college where they sent all of their officers about 15 years ago to retrain, to remember that it was about facilitation and not enforcement. So I think there's a lot of innovative ways we can go by really readdressing and revolutionizing. So every time I hear more panels, ombudsperson, I think it just adds to the layers rather than get into the issues that we really need to, which is a reordering or reimagination of the program, because there's exciting possibilities now.
Thank you, Mr. Bellissimo. Mr. Guy, several witnesses during our meetings have said that one of the biggest problems in IRC is the opaqueness, the lack of transparency, the difficulty people have in having access to information. I'd like to hear both from Mr. Guy and Mr. Bellissimo on that.
Sure, I could go first if possible. We talk about transparency, it is non-existent, especially all the way down the rung, which is when an applicant or a sponsor is looking for answers. When we raise ATIPs, we don't even get replies, we don't get answers. However, there are ATIPers who are lawyers and tend to get answers. So is that access of information fair? Does it serve everybody? Absolutely not. And when you do an interview, apparently your interview is not recorded. You are not able to take in counsel. And if, God forbid, you are refused, it takes almost a month to get the transcript. And the transcript of the interview only includes what the interviewing visa officer actually wants the committee or the tribunal to hear. It isn't actually what happened on the ground. And this has been confirmed by several people, including later on, you are going to hear this probably.
Merci, Monsieur Guy. Rapidement. Thank you, Mr. Guy. Very quickly, Mr. Bellissimo, on the lack of transparency.
Thank you. Look, I've been around long enough when the in-person interviews was the norm, not the rare exception. We need to get behind the curtain, user access in real time, being able to see what's happening in the officers. There's no need for this lack of transparency. It's becoming a faceless plug-and-play system where everything is a click away. It empowers digital ghost representatives to begin to exploit individuals. So things to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'd like to actually just follow up on the issue around interviews, first with Mr. Guy. In the brief from Voices for Families, it's noted that you're asking the government to direct IRCCs to suspend the interview process. And in the brief, it says that it is suspected that officers choose who to interview based on, quote, typical cultural and or social practices, end quote, as per the local immigration employee believes. And for many, the interviews remain unscheduled for years. So, Mr. Guy, you said that you've been waiting to reunite with your family for 5 years. You finally just got an interview after 5 years of applying with a 10-minute interview. And so could you tell the committee what you're asking for. Are you asking for the government to suspend the interview process and that the interview process needs to be waived or conducted within a maximum time frame of 30 days, like an additional document request? Mr. Guy.
Absolutely. So when IRCC requires a document from you or any additional information, there is a time frame of 30 days. But when we need to send in anything or like wait for an interview, it is indefinite. And unfortunately, when you're flagged as complex, there are no time frames, which is totally racist. Because a standard application for anybody under the age of 30 is 12 months. God forbid you're above that age, and God forbid that you found love across the nation on an outland application where visa is required, you get stuck in that round. And absolutely, we have waited 3 years. Some of these interviews take 5 minutes. The two things that we would either say is either it becomes virtual, as Honorable Marco did announce that they should be virtual, but they're not. In India, there are more than 30 interviews happening in a day. Some literally last 5 minutes. They only ask, do you know where your spouse works? How much she earns? And there you go. You waited 3 years to get 3 questions to be told you're approved. And another thing we're seeing right now is those that are approved and are from the 2019, 2018 backlog are only brought up to pre-arrival. And we are not getting PPR, while other people in the same interview rooms are getting PPR within a week. So yes, we would like it to be waived, looking that it has taken so long.
Thank you, Mr. Guy. How much time do I have, Madam Chair?
Minutes.
Okay. I'd like to quickly ask you, Mr. Guy, in this 5 years to which you've been waiting, or other families like you who's been waiting, have people applied for a temporary residence visa and to which they've been rejected because immigration or IRCC is not satisfied that you would return to your country of origin? And can you expand on this dual intent concern of 179B within the regulations where people get regularly rejected because you have close ties in Canada?
Absolutely. So 179B is the norm used to reject outland applications. Although dual intent was announced by Honorable Marco, it did not make a difference to the visa officers. Again, they're using the thing that, oh, you will not return because your husband is, in my case, in Canada. You have a strong tie there. But again, the only option you give outland applications is to apply for PR. Have you given an option for a spousal visa or a bridging visa until the application is done, right? That would have really helped. And we thank Honorable Jenny Kwan. She did raise the House of Commons petition against 179B to be abolished, and which we're yet to hear any resolution to.
So with 179B, in fact, there's been a private member's bill tabled in the last parliament. Unfortunately, because the election was called, it died on the order paper and we never got to debate it. And that recommendation is for the government to not be allowed to reject applications on the basis of the notion that they don't believe that people would return to their home country unless if there is a record of violation of immigration measures. Is that your recommendation to the government?
Correct. If a sponsor has approval and the application is stuck in a visa office abroad, absolutely, that's where they should issue these visas so that, like I said, it can act as a bridging permit so that our spouses can be with us during these trying times.
impacts, of course, is that the lengthy delay is significant. And as you go through the process, many of your applications or documentations have expired, like medicals, amongst other things. What's your recommendation to the government on that?
And I'm facing that right now. I'm trying to get my re-medicals done. There are no available spots with the panel physicians. For members from Cuba, there is no panel physician in Cuba, and they require a visa to go to a third country to get re-medicals done, which is unfortunate.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Guy. Time is up for Ms. Kwan. I would just thank the witnesses for appearing before the committee. Sorry we had to go through some motions in the beginning and some time was wasted. If any of the witness would like to send a written submission to the clerk for the things which they were not able to bring it today, they can email it to the clerk of the committee and it will be circulated to all the members. Yes, Ms. Kayabaga?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot to ask for Mr. Guy to submit in writing where he got that information from, or the flags of IRCC are, because I want to understand how he got that. So if we could get that in writing, would be great.
Mr. Guy, if you can send that in writing, that's what the members would like to see. With that,
absolutely.
Thank you once again to all the witnesses for appearing before the committee today. With that, the first panel comes to an end. Our witnesses for the second panel are already logged in. So without wasting any time, we will proceed to our next panel. And I would like to welcome our witnesses for the second panel. We are joined by Imam Yusuf Badat from Toronto. We are also joined by Debbie Douglas, the Executive Director for Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. And our third witness for this panel is Mary Carmel Bien Amy, Co-Administrator for Spousal Sponsorship Advocates. With this, I would welcome all the members for appearing before the committee. All of you will be provided 5 minutes for your opening remarks, and then we will proceed to the round of questioning. Our first witness for today's panel is Imam Yusuf Badat. Imam Badat, welcome, and thanks a lot for appearing before the committee in spite of Ramadan. I know you must be very busy. So you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Imam Badat, you can please begin.
Yes. Thank you for affording the opportunity to be here and be present on this panel. So as an imam within the community of one of the largest mosques in Toronto, a lot of the family members or spouses who have applied for immigration for their partners or family members from abroad constantly bring this concern to me that it's been months, it's been years, and we're unable to join our families with us. And in particular, what happens in three areas that I see keep repeated by congregation members is the question from Immigration Canada about the validity of marriage, and also some of the questioning that takes place to individuals who are supposed to be coming to Canada to join their spouses or their family members, and also the issue about the duration, the length of time it takes to process some of these cases. So when it comes to the validity of marriage, sometimes people who practice Islam, they're very conservative, they're very traditional. So sometimes it's an arranged marriage. There was no dating that took place prior. Families got together and they arranged the marriage. So when questions are asked about when did the dating start, or when questions asked about, what were the locations that you met up prior to the marriage, then there is no such data like this available because the particular individuals, they don't follow the culture that we may be used to here in Canada of how we date and get to know our partners and then marry. Similarly, the concept of common law in many cultures,
where Muslims live and where Islam is practiced, there's no such thing as living together prior to getting married. So these are challenges that delay the process in genuine cases when a spouse is trying to sponsor their family member. In some situations, I've been also approached by congregants saying that we have our first child and it's been 3 years, it's been 5 years, and where the case of immigration is just not being approved. So these are some issues. I echo the sentiments of one of the previous witnesses in the previous panel that in the cases of divorce, it's very challenging, and the amount of effort it takes for many clients to prove that they were divorced, and the process that went through, again, it extensively delays the cases. In some situations, the cultures, because they vary, as I said earlier, specifically women, they find it very challenging to answer some of the questions. I'll just give you a simple example. In some of the cultures where Islam is practiced, when we talk to someone who we respect, oftentimes we're looking down. So women specifically in some of the cultures that we come from, when they're talking to someone that's interviewing them, they often may look down. And if the interviewer doesn't know the culture, they may assume that there's something that's being hidden, or there's something that's not accurate here, and that's why they're looking down. But it's actually a cultural element of respecting the person who's interviewing. So these are all facts that make things challenging when we try to assume that all cultures are similar to the Canadian culture or the Canadian context, or the way we get married here in Canada, or the way we date, or the way we have common law in this context here in a Canadian situation. It's not the same. And to judge each application based on our culture here in Canada, it can delay the process. It can cause individuals to be very far from accepting an applicant who's a genuine spouse, who's a genuine family member. So in summary, these are some of my remarks here for the panel.
To Imam Badat. We will now proceed to our next witness, Debbie Douglas, the Executive Director for Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. Ms. Douglas, you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks. You can please begin.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important study. I'm the Executive Director of OCASI, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. We are the umbrella organization for immigrant and refugee serving agencies across Ontario. I will begin with 4 actions that I believe the government should take to address racial inequities and racism in the immigration system. They are: 1, conduct a comprehensive racial equity review of legislation, regulations, policies, and practices. 2, collect disaggregated intersectional race data across all IRCC activities. 3, conduct a comprehensive racial equity of IRCC funding in its settlement and integration programming. 4, establish an independent ombudsperson's office for IRCC. The Polaro report confirmed what some have known and many of us have suspected for a long time, that racism and racial discrimination and bias is present in the immigration system, internally towards IRCC employees, and you see that in the senior leadership of IRCC and the absence of racialized employees, and very likely, as we know from what we've heard in testimony, but also what we hear from very many communities in immigration decision-making. First, racial equity review of legislation. Our member agencies have frequently mentioned immigration challenges faced by racialized clients. They hear about questioning whether spousal relationships are genuine and frequently denying spousal sponsorship applications from particular areas of the world. questioning whether parent-child relationships are genuine, demanding DNA proof, and often denying these applications. We often see this demand being made on African clients, the way we often see the spousal sponsorship questions being asked of applicants from South Asia. There are many other challenges, but my time is limited. We need a comprehensive racial equity review of legislation, policies, and practices in order to identify systemic bias and identify areas where individual bias and racism can color decision-making. 2, disaggregated data. A comprehensive racial equity review would be supported by ongoing disaggregated intersectional race data collection across all of IRCC's activities. Data will help to identify patterns of systemic discrimination and bias. Data should be collected on all Section 15 grounds of the Canadian Charter, as well as on immigration status, which is not currently in Section 15. IRCC already collects data on most of these factors, including immigration status, but not on race or ethnicity, or religion or faith, and I don't believe they've started either on issues of sexuality or sexual orientation. The data should be publicly available. 3, comprehensive review of funding. A racial equity review will show who and what activities get funded. The former CIC, Citizenship and Immigration Canada, now IRCC, defunded 13 settlement agencies in Ontario in 2011. 6 of these agencies work directly with racialized communities. Of the 6, 4 were African community agencies. No explanation, no warning, just a complete defunding during the 2011-2012 funding cycle. Immigrant and refugee settlement agencies are a focal point for community activities and community-based leadership. They're not simply third-party service providers. They know their communities they serve and are trusted, which is integral to credible and effective service delivery. I often speak of community-based, especially ethno-specific organizations, as cultural brokers, as the bridges between newcomers and the communities where they are planning to settle. We need data on who and what is funded to know if racialized communities are equitably served and community organizations are equitably resourced. Last, the independent ombudsperson. Finally, we strongly urge the establishment of an independent ombudsperson office for IRCC. It should be external to the department, adequately resourced, and have a legislative mandate to take action on individual and systemic bias and discrimination. I am aware the ombudsperson proposal has been recommended to this committee during previous studies. Given the significance of the immigration program to Canada as a whole and the vast powers IRCC decision makers have on individual applications, it would serve the public good to establish such an office.
Sorry for interrupting, Ms. Douglas. Your time is up. You will get an opportunity to talk further in the round of questioning. We will now proceed to our third witness, Mary Carmel Bien-Aimé, representing Spousal Sponsorship Advocates. Ms. Carmel Bien-Aimé, you will have 5 minutes. You can please begin.
Bonjour, Madame la Présidente.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and honorable committee members. I'm speaking to you with respect to spousal sponsorship advocates. It's an honor for me to present the recommendations that we feel are important. According to the results of the Pallola report, racialized groups are marginalized because of their place of birth or color of their skin. They're not considered for promotions, but they're kept in temporary contract positions. As a result, they can't denounce discriminatory actions that they witness out of fear of consequences. Has anyone penalized since this report came out? It is obvious that systemic and integrated prejudice plays a role in decision-making for immigration files. Immigration officers have preconceived ideas about people coming from certain countries. For example, there are the 30 dirty nations in Africa. they have no confidence, particularly with people coming from Nigeria. On a report dated March 15th, there has been an accumulation of 1.8 applications. For family reunification, there are hundreds and hundreds of files. In last January, the Minister of Immigration announced that the sponsorship program was going to be improved. And recently, it was changed to 18 months. Why is there no solution offered to families who are suffering? We have to reduce bureaucracy in order to in order to deal with this backlog. We are denying the humanity of these people. What we need to make the people who are responsible for this process to really put an emphasis on family reunification, and they have to bear in mind the physical, mental, and financial health of our families. That being said, I'd like to share my recommendations to deal with family reunification delays. The recommendations in the short term provide a visa for a temporary worker for families with the exemption of 179B and really accept the applications an ombudsman office to deal with complaints. An ombudsman would enable the federal court and the ICRR to have fewer files to process. Transparency would be shown through the measures taken to resolve differences, and the families would be no longer have such financial problems. Record interviews. Interview couples when it's recommended. Long-term recommendations. Rotate immigration offers from 2 to 5 years in order to avoid the familiarity and biased employees. And make this rotation a requirement for the position. Increase the staff in missions or add additional missions to help, such as in the Accra office that deals with 12 countries and Dakar deals with 16 countries. Mandatory training on cultural differences. This training should be followed every 6 months by the local people hired and visa officers. Also, and this is my last recommendations, prioritize transparency. In summary, we appreciate that you are conducting this study. However, know that many spouses receive a diagnosis of depression and have suicidal thoughts. Canadian citizens and permanent residents feel betrayed. Bureaucracy does not have any place in family affairs, and all families concerned are victims of the system. To conclude, remember that no one is born equal, but there are people people with privileges must show an example. That being said, I eagerly await your questions on the issue.
Thanks a lot. We will now proceed to our round of questioning and begin our first round with Mr. Helen. Mr. Helen, you will have 6 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses, especially and in the first panel as well, for sharing not just your hardships, but the emotions that a lot of other people are probably reaching out to you about as well through the hardships that all of you are facing. I wanted to touch on the recording of interviews because that seems like a theme. And it's something that we hear in our offices as well. Sometimes when a decision is made, we see that the officer has something else in his notes, and our constituents are often telling us something different. And Imam Saab, you touched on this, that sometimes there's cultural differences that maybe the officer does not understand as well. But Ms. BNM, I hope I said your last name right, can you elaborate a little bit more on how recording these interviews would create more transparency and give the applicant a little bit more, and not just hold the officer to more account, but give the applicant a little bit more power in their hands in the process?
Thank you for the question. So basically, the reason why I say we should tape or record these interviews, it's because I'm in the process myself. My husband went through the interview. What he told me happened and what the agent wrote in the GCMS notes was completely different. And it's not the first time I hear this, because as a spousal sponsorship advocate administrator, I'm also a therapist during those times because I hear the same thing over and over again. They always say, I said this, but it's not in the notes. So by recording these interviews, it would hold the visa officer more accountable. And if this person would have implicit or explicit bias, they will not have any space to project their own bias into the person that they're interviewing. So I think it's very important, and it should be mandatory to record all of them.
I agree with that, and I think that it would make like I said, the officer a lot more accountable. Imam Saab, can you elaborate a little bit more on to the committee about sometimes insensitive questions that get asked by because we hear this again in our MP offices all the time about sometimes insensitive questioning and what kind of impact that has on the applicants.
Yeah, so as I mentioned in my presentation briefly, that the cultures we come from differ, and some of the questions that may be asked is, when did you start dating? Where was your first kiss? Is this an arranged marriage, or how did you meet? Is it even possible that you guys got married? Like questions that sometimes turn off the person that's being interviewed and make it more challenging for them. So I hope these few examples give you some clarity on that.
Saab, do you feel that maybe cultural appropriate training would be something that should be introduced to CBSA officers and IRCC officers?
Definitely. To understand different cultures, different communities, it'll make the process much more smoother and respectful for all.
Thank you for that. Ms. Bien M, you mentioned about, and one of our other witnesses also mentioned about TRVs for spousal applications. I think that's a good idea, and I would agree with you that if the person is already going to move here and they have the intent to come here to work and contribute to Canada at a certain stage, maybe that would TRV would be a good idea. Can you elaborate a little bit more on some of the benefits of that?
Well, thank you for the question. So to basically make it short is they should, like IRCC should give all of the spouses a special TRV. First of all, that Article 179B should not even be considered because yes, obviously they have ties to Canada because their spouse is here. But by saying they feel that their spouse will never go back to their country, why would principal applicant ruin their chance of staying permanently in Canada by overstaying your visa? Like for me, it makes no logic. They would help the economy, to answer your question, and also they will pay tax, they will be with their family, and they will also see if they do like the country. Maybe they won't like it. Maybe the family will move out and go to the home country of the principal applicant. So basically it would help because right now we need labor. We have tons of jobs, but nobody to fill them. And these people, our spouses, are very hardworking people, and I don't believe they would stay on the couch and watch TV. So it would definitely be beneficial for the spouse, the children, the families, and this country as well.
Thank you for that. How much time do I have left?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Maybe you can just elaborate, Ms. BNM, about transparency and accountability.
So for the transparency, they should provide clear status updates and not say your file is on queue. They have to keep also better record of the documents they receive and not ask them 3 or 4 times. Provide and respect the timeline provided. Please stop the blanket automatic email response and respond to email in a timely manner and respect the time frame that they provided.
Time is up, Mr. Hallan. Thank you. We will now proceed to Mr. Dhaliwal. Mr. Dhaliwal, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I will echo your comments that you made to Imam Badat about the Ramadan. I would love to wish him Mubarakbad on this religious and spiritual occasion. And I also have a Madam Chair question to Imam as well. The way I see it is I see many cases. I know many cases are passed in the application, but there are many that are coming to my office that have issues, particularly with Regulation 4 that was brought in by then Immigration Minister Jason Kenney from the Conservatives. And I would love to see that Regulation 4 abolished today, because that asks the couples, number one, to prove that their marriage is genuine. It already have so many difficulties, not only in the Islamic community, but also Sikhs, Hindus, and others in India and Pakistan that I have experienced. That is, one is the genuineness of the marriage, and second meter they put it in is when you entered into the marriage, that it was not a marriage of, it was a marriage of convenience, because you never met before. I'm also one of those that had arranged marriage 34 years ago. So, Imam, I would like to ask you, how many cases of such failures that you see, and you would agree with me that this Regulation 4 should be abolished?
Yeah, so as an imam, the particular mosque I work at, we have at least 4,000 coming for the Jummah prayer, which is the main prayer of the week. I would say at least 1/3 of those who have applied for immigration are coming up with these concerns and these questions about why the delay, why is my marriage not valid? I was actually brought for expert testimony by Immigration Canada on a case where the spouse was away from the other spouse for 10 years. And they finally gave the go-ahead because they weren't just moving the case forward because they did not believe that they were actually married. There was also a child that was born, and the spouse that is here, a citizen of Canada, was going every other year to spend some time with the spouse. And they just couldn't believe that the marriage actually took place. And the concern was that, why don't you have photographs of your wedding? Where's the invitation card? Some of these villages where people come from back home is they don't have all these flashy weddings, etc. It's just a simple thing, and they don't meet from before. It's just an arranged type of marriage. But finally, the case was completed after 10 years. So again, to answer your question, it's a sizable amount. I would say at least 1/3 of my congregation who has some form of immigration application in file is waiting, delayed, anywhere between 2 to 10 years, as I said.
Madam Chair, this is a very serious issue, and as Imam faces in his congregation, and I face in my constituency as well. And I would like to find out some tangible solutions from Honorable Imam that we on this side can do to improve this situation.
Yeah, I think the cultural sensitivity is very important. Any laws or policies that block this, as you gave a recommendation earlier about abolishing what Jason Kenney put into place. So these type of blocks need to be removed. We need to treat everybody with equity, fairness, justice. We need to understand that all these people that are coming to Canada, Canada's land of immigration, they only enhance the country. And we need to unite families, not disenfranchise families and communities based on personal biases or the lack of understanding of various cultures.
And Madam Chair, through to you, to other witnesses, if they have any other suggestion that to remove these cultural barriers that some of the communities face, are there tangible solutions that they have in mind?
Madam Chair, if I may, it's Debbie Douglas. Mr. Dhaliwal, I would suggest that in addition to what the Imam has suggested, that we also take a look at the collection of data on this. We have lots of stories, lots of anecdotal information. I often say what gets measured gets addressed. Let's get the hard data so we can continue to prove that our communities have absolutely been correct, that they are facing differential treatment based on their countries of origin, based on religion, based on race. But until we have that data and we are very clear as Canadians that we are expecting the department to answer then when we see a disproportionate impact on particular communities to then put these things in place. I think cultural education is really good. I think we have to begin to hold those in decision-making power accountable for the decisions that is being made by the department. If folks know that their jobs are on the line, that they will need to report out publicly the decisions and the various communities that are being disproportionately affected, I believe that also changes behavior. I think there are a number of tools that we need to use. Education and cultural training, absolutely, but let's also collect the data, report out, and have the department talk about what it is it's doing to address the findings of the data collection.
Ms. BNM, do you have anything to add, or Mr. Badat?
To continue to what Mrs. Douglas said, I completely agree. We need data. We need to interview people. We need to, I need to stop. So I agree with her. Nothing else to add.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dhaliwal. We will now proceed to Mr. Brunel Desep. Mr. Brunel Desep, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Bien-Aimé, I listened to your testimony carefully. You've come up with some suggestions for this committee, which will be most useful. And you talked about your own personal circumstances. So first of all, I have a question. You talked about the special RTVs for reuniting families, but with the exception of 179B, this should put, do you think this will put an end to this double intention? I believe so, because if we don't need such a visa, there's not a problem. So why are immigration visas why do they want to use 179B only for people who need a visa? That doesn't resolve the backlog, but at least that will reunite families while waiting for the visa process to be completed. I don't see why there's a difference between countries that don't require a visa and those that do. Thank you for your answer. In your statement, you talked about the option of creating an ombudsman position. In your opinion, what does that mean exactly? What would this change? Is it something that's required? And if so, why? To answer your question, yes, we do need an ombudsman office and mandates to create a diversified committee to organize work. The visa officers can be inclusive when they make decisions. The mandate will be deal with sponsorship applications, and this will they'll give a fair review of families before they go through the appeal process. The CIMM can recognize that there is systemic racism, and the team can also challenge the hypothesis and deal with implicit bias, and the team can also be a partner in the change and evolutionary process. It has to be a completely independent office. I agree with that, because when the applications are turned down, it's very expensive to appeal for everybody. So the money should be placed at the right spot so that applications are processed fairly. Thank you very much. There's another thing that you were suggesting that's quite innovative. I've never heard of this before. Yeah, I find this suggestion very interesting. You're suggesting that the immigration officers be rotated every 2 to 5 years to avoid bias. I believe those are the words you used. Could you elaborate further on that? On this suggestion. Thank you for your question. Yes, because when an immigration office is there for 10, 15 years, like it or not, people start to get a little bit complacent. They're going to make decisions based on what the local employee says, what he or she sees. So if you rotate these officers, this will avoid the situation. Oh, yeah, I talked about them being blasé. Yes, if you're in the same position year after year, it becomes easier to turn down applications just based on your own bias. So yes, I think that a rotation should be done every 2 to 5 years, and we know that the people that are part of this whole process are going to know, yes, I'm going to be in Accra for 3 years, and I'll go to another country. I'm going to be rotated out. And that's going to make them more open-minded, give them more information, because when you travel throughout the world, you get educated. One final question. Everyone talks about the delays. We hear about this in the newspapers, on the radio, on the in the television, but you have personal experience with IRCC. So when we talk about delays, is it real? Yes, it's real, because right now, my husband comes from one of the 30 corrupt countries. He's Nigerian, and I've been waiting for 30 months. He's still not here. So yes, it's true. I'm the proof that yes, it is the case. And there are about 5 to 6,000 people in our group who are saying the same thing. We don't understand that when dealing with white countries, there's no problem. But I see that there's culture bias has a huge impact on the decision-making process. Why don't we process visa applications the same way as we do elsewhere? It should be homogeneous, same treatment for everyone. And I'm the proof that this is not the case. Thank you, Ms. Bien-Aimé.
Thank you. We will now proceed to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, you will have 6 minutes. You can please begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their presentations. I'd like to follow up with Madam Bien-Aimé on this question. Oftentimes, IRCC will cite these reasons to refuse people's TRV applications, and they would base it on Section 179B of IRPR on the regulations to refuse the application based on your travel history, based on the purpose of the visit, and based on the limited employment prospects in your country of residence. Would you say that those reasons and the policies that IRCC adopt to allow for those reasons to be used are inherently discriminatory?
Thank you for your question. Yes, it is 100% discriminatory. Absolutely.
And to follow up, would that be a reason why that an independent ombudsperson should be put in place to review exactly those kinds of policies and its implications, and to determine and to root out discriminatory policies within IRCC?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with your statement. And the reason is, if there is an ombudsman office, the agent will be very careful in how they process, because they know there's going to be someone up there that will look at their work, and nobody likes to be reprimanded at work. So for sure, everybody will be more careful and their work will actually be done properly.
In the meantime, until we wait for this process to be in place and for this fulsome, I hope, independent review to be done by an ombudsperson, should the government suspend the use of 179B, or alternatively not be allowed to reject TRV applications on the basis that they believe someone would not return to their country of origin unless if there is a pattern of violations of immigration measures?
Absolutely, because right now the IRCC uses Section 179B. It states that the processing officer doubt the visitor will return to his or her home country within the visa period. The refusal is totally unfounded in the case of married couples. By attempting to stay in the country legally, obviously, like I previously stated, they will jeopardize their application, and they don't want to do that. we want to call the temporary visa because foreign spouse from visa-required country can come and live with their Canadian partners and children, just like spouses from visa-exempt countries. While the government continues to process the application, it won't clear the backlog, but at least these people would be together. Because right now, under the current system, TRV applications from foreign spouses are systematically and categorically denied. My spouse was refused 3 times, stating all the rules of all the articles of 179B. So definitely we should have the temporary visa.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go to Ms. Debbie Douglas. On the issue around discriminatory policies within IRCC, I'd like to touch on the caregivers program. The caregivers programs are made to go through inordinate hoops while separated from their loved ones. One of the issues, and it was touched on in the last panel, was around language requirements. And the intended purpose of the language proficiency requirement for immigration is to help ensure immigration applicants have the necessary language ability to transition successfully to a life in Canada. Now, caregivers, having obtained their work permit here in Canada and are working here in Canada already, have already proved that they have the language proficiency to do their jobs here in Canada. Why should they be made to do the language proficiency test requirements to pass level 5? And do you think that the government should do away with that requirement? Ms. Debbie Douglas.
Absolutely. It is something that we have raised with the government in the past. If someone is already working in the language, and we see that for caregivers from English-speaking countries as well, like the Caribbean, it makes no sense that if someone is already working in the language, they've already proved that they're able to communicate, they certainly have the language in order to do their job. It makes no sense for them to have to, once again, take a language test to prove for PR purposes, and then after being a permanent resident may have to do it again for citizenship. It makes absolutely no sense why we continue to language test folks. There's another issue around issues of deafness and how then do you test for language and all, which is a whole other conversation we have. But to answer your question, no, there isn't any need for caregivers, especially who is having such a difficult time transitioning to PR, to have to pay to take classes to prove and then take the test to prove that they can speak a language that they've been working in for 2, 3, 4 years, if not longer.
Thank you. On the caregivers program, we also run into another problem because with all of the delays in the quota that is in place, many of the applicants would not even be able to get a spot to apply. And so what is your recommendation to address that situation?
I believe that the government needs to lift caps, and I understand the backlog, right? I think it's something we're all struggling with in all streams of immigration. So the government needs to build capacity in the system. I agree with Madame Bien-Aimé in terms of the bureaucracy and removing some of that bureaucracy for particular streams, particularly things like family unification, spousal sponsorship, and those pieces. We need to build capacity in the system. We need to lift the cap on caregivers being able to transition from temporary workers to PRs.
Thank you. Yes, time is up for Ms. Kwan. With that, I would thank all the witnesses for appearing before the committee. Yes, Mr. Jennings.
There are 2 minutes left on the clock, and I'd love to have them since I'm up next for questions. Is that okay?
Because everyone will not be able to have it.
I know, but the rounds show me next.
We can have quick 30 seconds for each person, if that's the will of the committee. We are left with 2 minutes, so just to provide equal opportunity so that everyone has the time slot, we can have 30 seconds for each party.
Okay.
Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, and Imam Bidat, Ramadan Mubarak, and thank you for being with us. I guess I want to distinguish between 2 issues: the issue of of the principle of marriage verification and the issue of how it's been implemented. Clearly, you've identified some problems in implementation, and the government's been in for 7 years. They haven't improved on the implementation at all. I think the policy objective is maybe a good one, but the implementation is clearly problematic and not being done in a culturally appropriate way. Could you share with us some suggestions about how we could implement the policy objective of ensuring that we're verifying that we're talking about real marriages, but that we're doing it in a way that's culturally sensitive and that responds to the realities of how marriage operates in different cultures?
Yeah, thank you so much. So if we understand how marriage takes place, for example, from a cultural point of view, then it'll be easy to identify that the marriage has taken place. But if we don't have any idea of how marriage takes place in different cultures and different communities, it'll be challenging to assume that marriages only take place in a particular way. So I think that would help, that cultural education and input from the experts of that community and that society that will facilitate a better understanding, so you can verify that this is a genuine marriage.
Excellent. Thank you. I wonder if you can just follow up in writing with any specific suggestions that could guide IRCC in the process of verification, specifically in your cultural context. So just in writing. Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting, Mr. Janis. And Imam Bedad, if you can submit in writing. So Mr. Janis got 1 minute and 30 seconds. So we will give 1 minute and 30 seconds to Mr. Al-Khouri. Mr. Al-Khouri, you will have 1 minute and 30 seconds. You can please begin.
Thank you. Ramadan Mubarak, Kul Aam wa Antum Khair, Imam Badat. I totally agree with you that Harper government has complicated the process, and it was terrible. While since 2015, the government in power have reformed, and I could give you some example by reducing the unification time between spouse and for up to 12 months issue and continuing. But with the COVID, that complicated the issue. I understand your pain because I have a lot of Muslim community in my riding. But mind you that also when we put doubt in the mind of the Asian, he has to go further in application. And honestly speaking, in my riding, we found couple of marriage was fake. And when this come to the mind of the staff, they have to verify probably there is some security, terrorist activity beyond that. But in order to come to a point to solve this issue, I would require you, if it's possible, to submit it to this committee in writing. What's your concern and the recommendation to solve it? It will clarify our way in continuing our effort in solving this problem. Thank you.
Yes, very welcome. Yes, I will definitely do that. And I do understand that there are genuine cases and there might be a fraudulent activity as well. But we need to create that balance where majority, which are genuine cases, are not affected by the procedures that we adopt. So I will it'll be my pleasure to submit something in documentation for your review.
Remember that, Mr. Al-Khouri, time. No, your time is up, Mr. Al-Khouri.
Thank you.
We will have 45 seconds for Mr. Brunel Desep. Mr. Brunel Desep, you can please begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to give the floor to Ms. Bien-Aimé. Would you like to add anything? I found what you said was very relevant. Thank you very much. All I wanted to add with respect to 179B, if we can go ahead with the TRV, that would be good. But I'm recommending that these applications be processed in Canada. Canada's a little bit more open to this, and that would also help to ensure that the officer's not too blasé about it all. I'm sorry for the anglicisms I'm using, but that's what I'm trying to say is this would do a lot to eliminate the problem, that is, if they were processed here.
Now, and our panel with Ms. Kwan for 45 seconds. Ms. Kwan, you can please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to Madam Bien-Aimé for that clarification. I absolutely agree with her proposal. I'd like to ask Ms. Debbie Douglas on this question, though. The government has provided emergency visas for Ukraine and then also announced that they would provide a special immigration measure for extended family members for Ukraine. Do you think that the government should apply the same special immigration measures to people from Afghanistan and other regions who are also faced with dire situations?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question, especially we applaud the government undertaking an extension of the definition of family. It is something that we absolutely support, but it must be extended to other communities, to Afghans, but to other refugee populations and other folks who are displaced. Also for family reunification. I think that it's long overdue for us to recognize that the nuclear family is a Western construct and don't necessarily represent the majority of the world. And so if families are willing to support each other, to bring each other into Canada, it makes absolute sense that they be supported to do so. So I believe that by redefining family for the purposes of Ukraine, the government needs to extend that to all communities who are wanting to come to Canada.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas.
As refugees or through family reunification.
Thank you, Ms. Douglas. Time is up. And on behalf of all the members, I really want to thank all the witnesses for appearing before the committee and your important input to this study which we have undertaken. And is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Adjourn.
Oh, okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.